I am Christian Freeman. I am a Black woman from Memphis, Tennessee. I've always wanted to be a doctor. Um, Growing up, you don't really know what that means. It's like, oh, yeah, I want to be a doctor. I go to the doctor and my doctor's cool. So, that's always something I said. I can't really recall myself saying anything else. I'll have to ask my parents and be like, hey, did I ever have any other thoughts? But that's really all that I can remember, like from a very, very young age. And then, seeing different experiences that my family members have just kind of really pushed me in that direction. I remember one of my aunts found out she had like a tumor in her brain when I was like 12, maybe, right? And I ended up going to like one of her appointments with her or to the hospital or something with her. I just remember being there in her neurology appointment and I'm like talking to this neurologist like, well, how are you going to get the tumor out? And just like asking him all these questions. And I'm like 11 or 12 years old. And he was probably like, girl, what? But like, that is something that I distinctly remember. And for a while I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a neurologist. I'm going to be a neurosurgeon. Just as I was exposed to different things, I just kept being attracted to different parts of medicine. But as far as I've known, like I've always wanted to go into medicine. I think the defining moment for me that just for sure let me know that I was going to medical school would have to be when I was teaching right out of undergrad. I started teaching with Teach for America. I came back home. I was a high school teacher. I taught biology and anatomy and physiology, subjects that I was already passionate about. So that was great. Like I loved my time as a teacher. There were so many moments that like during those 2 years that really reminded me that yes, teaching was great, but that's not my calling. Um, or at least not, in that capacity. So there were several situations, I remember my first year teaching, one of my students, I found out had sickle cell disease and she was always missing school and would fall behind on her assignments. And just talking to her about her illness and seeing what she understood about, she really didn't understand a lot about, something that had been keeping her in the hospital for so much of her life. And that for me was just like, wow, do our people really understand what's happening to them or what's really going on physically within their bodies? And the same thing, the following year when I was teaching anatomy and physiology, this was a class for honor students who were like seniors or juniors, so getting ready to go to college. And the more that we would just go through the different systems of the body, the more their eyes were just open and they were like, oh my gosh, like that's how that works. And I remember we got to the reproductive section of our studies, which was like the very last subject. So it's like May, school's about to be out in a few weeks, and we're talking about like reproductive health. And I had to get permission from my principal to actually teach like reproductive health the way that I feel like it should be taught, because in Tennessee, they don't do that. So I sent out a letter to parents and I was like, hey, this is what I want to talk about. I want to talk about contraception. I want to talk about, I just want to answer the questions that these young people have, because they have so many and they're not being answered by anybody else. Or if they're getting answers, they're getting them from their friends or off the internet, which is a little questionable. So after that experience, just, filling in a gap in my community as far as health education and health literacy, I was like, all right, that's it for me. I see where my passion lies. Like it's just starting to, come out more and more through health education. And so I was like, okay, this is it. Like I'm going back to medical school. I started this journey for the next little Black girl from Memphis who was like, hey, I want to be a doctor, but I don't know one. And then somebody can be like, oh my gosh, do you know Dr. Christian Freeman? Like you should totally talk to her. So like that is what keeps me going. Talking to students who are upcoming in medicine, whether they're pre-med students or younger medical students, talking to them and, just trying to encourage them on their journey, because I know that I didn't have that. And so trying to be that for somebody else and, listening to their particular stories, that's been very helpful. Now that I'm on like the clinical side of being in medical school, that's been incredible, because, you know, I can see patients that remind me of my why. I can walk into a patient's room and it's like, yeah, I'm here to, you know, ask you about your medical condition, but also like I can relate to you, you know, like we come from similar communities, we have similar experiences, and, you know, you can connect on a deeper level with people, even though they're your patients. And so just constantly having those reminders, whether it's, you know, talking to pre-med students and mentoring other people, or, you know, throughout the patient experiences that I have, just, I have to keep it in mind, because anytime that I lose sight of why I started this journey in the first place, that's when that self-doubt starts to creep in. That's when that you could be doing something else and be chilling starts to creep in. Or, oh, your friends who majored in business, they've been making six figures for 5 years now. What are you doing? You know, like you just have to stay focused and have to remember your why.